Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for being here. Tonight's program is being held both in Creole and in English, with live interpretation provided by Respond Crisis Translation with Christelle and Debbie, serving as our interpreters once again. If you're watching on Facebook Live, for example, on Chocarella, you need translation, please join us on our Zoom. The link will be pinned as the first comment at the bottom of the video, of the live video. Rebonsoir encore. Programme à soir, comme nous connaissons déjà, à la fois en anglais et en créole. Et Respond Crisis Translation à permettre nous de suivre lui avec Christelle et Debbie qui servi nous comme interprète. Si vous suivez sur Facebook Live ou bien sur Chocarella et au besoin de traduction, tant pis s'il vous plaît, venez joindre nous sur page sous Zoom nous hein, et lien directement en bas commentaire yo, si tu as besoin de traduction. Bienvenue encore l'autre fois dans Rebrasser, une série chita parler sous affaires qui concernaient Haïti ak Haïtien que Haiti Response Coalition portait pour nous. Non pas M. Naomi Labati et on l'autre fois encore, moi vraiment ravi pour me là avec nous à soir. Objectif série ça, c'est mettre lumière sur Haïtien ak vrais amis Haïti qui fait travail dit pour nous capi bien comprendre défi que Haïti ak petit li yo que yo en dans pays qui yo dehors pays à travers ces journées jodi. Et en même temps redéfinir gens nous parler de Haïti tout. N'a profité remercier partenaire
Pardon,
nous.
Naomi.
Oui.
Priez pour commencer l'interprétation.
Oh oui.
Faire introduction pour vous.
Exactement. Merci pour rappel là, Melinda. Actuellement, bon petit moment pour nous pour nous dire Christelle à Debbie, s'il te plaît, expliquer comment l'interprétation a pu passer. Merci pour rappel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Naomi. My name is Debbie, and I will be giving you instructions on how to activate your Zoom interpretation because today's meeting will be held in Haitian Creole and in English. If you are using a computer, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a tablet or phone, you're going to click on More or on the three dots, and you will see a menu that includes an option called Language Interpretation. To listen to the interpreting, click on the globe icon or language interpretation, then choose your language channel. If you're using a phone or tablet, click on Done. If you cannot hear the interpreter on your channel, please ask for help in the chat or raise your hand. Please help us promote language justice. That means speak slowly and clearly, especially if you're reading. Mute your microphone if you're not speaking. If you do not understand all the languages being spoken in this place, please join the English channel. And if you join a language channel, only speak the language of that channel. Thank you.
Bonsoir tout le monde, moi c'est Christelle, je vais dans le même message là en créole. Donc, si vous utilisez un ordinateur, ou avez une icône globe là, dans la partie en bas écran là à droite. Si vous sur une tablette ou soit téléphone, vous cliquez sur plus ou soit trois petits points yo, et puis vous avez un menu qui est là-dedans une option qui est les interprétation langue. Pour écouter interprétation, cliquez sur l'icône globe là ou soit sur interprétation langue. Après ça, choisis canal langue. Si vous utilisez un téléphone ou sur une tablette, cliquez sur Fini. Si vous pas qu'à tendre interprète là sur canal 1, demandez aide dans le chat là ou soit levez main. Aidez-nous à encourager justice linguistique. Parlez doucement et puis clair. Surtout si vous appelez un texte. Fermez microphone ou le ou pas parler. Si vous pas comprendre toute langue yo, parler dans espace ça, tant pis rentrer dans canal anglais. Si vous rentrez dans un canal langue, parlez dans le canal ça seulement. Merci.
Merci Debbie, merci Christelle. Pour me reprendre bien rapide, ça me t'a dit avant, pour nous avoir l'opportunité de tendre dans tous les deux langues, m'a couru dit que Rebrasser, c'est son série chita parler sous les affaires qui concernent Haïti et que Haiti Response Coalition portait pour nous. Non, moi c'est Naomi Labati et moi content l'autre fois encore avec nous à soir. Objectif série ça, c'est mettre lumière sur haïtien ak zami Haïti qui peut travailler dit pour yo capable porter pour nous capable pi bien comprendre ça Haïti a traversé journée jodi hein. Et en même temps redéfinir gens nous parler de Haïti. N'a profité remercier partenaire nous yo qui c'est Haitian American Foundation for Democracy, Haitian Bridge Alliance, Roots of Development ak Université des Atlantes qui rend programme ça possible. N'a rappelé nous que si nous avons une question quelconque, temps pour utiliser question section Q&A qui c'est dans Zoom là et et Melinda a NG a contrôlé Zoom avec Chocarella, donc pas hésiter à poser question, quelle que soit la question liée. Journée aujourd'hui, nous avons une discussion qui est très pertinente, qui est très importante, et je vais pas pour ça commencer. Puis, gros problème que Haïti a traversé aujourd'hui, c'est crise insécurité. Ça rend la vie peuple là impossible. So, thème nous aujourd'hui, c'est complications qui gagnent dans gens pour Port-au-Prince tounen gain sécurité. Et comme modérateur, nous gagnons Jessica Chu et Jake Johnston qui parle modérer conversation à soir. N'a dit nous tout le monde bienvenue, merci en pile pour attention nous.
Vic, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure thing. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. And thank you to Belinda, the Haiti Response Coalition, Angie, Naomi, the translators. I just want to note how impressive a feat it is to do this, to have simultaneous translation in both languages, and how important that conversation is. So thank you to everyone for coming. I'll just introduce myself and offer some brief remarks, and then turn things over to Jessica to introduce the panel and kick things off. My name is Jake Johnston. I'm the Director of International Research at the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, D.C. And I've been writing about Haiti, traveling to Haiti, working with Haitian organizations, both in Haiti and here in the U.S. for about 16 years now. And yeah, I think this is a really, really important conversation. You know, I think if there's one thing we know, it is that Haiti's descent into this current state of insecurity did not come about overnight. Right? It was not a response to a single event, but rather a predictable, and in fact, in many cases, predicted evolution over many, many years that has been stoked and perpetuated by myriad factors, both domestic in Haiti and foreign. And I am quite sure, knowing the panelists that we have tonight, that we'll hear quite about some of those factors. But as Naomi was saying, and as the flyer sort of asked for this event, is why hasn't there been more progress? Right? For the better part of a decade, it seems like insecurity has simply gotten worse each year as demands for change have fallen on deaf ear after deaf ear. Why? Like, what are the barriers to progress? Why have efforts such as the Kenya-led, US-financed multinational security support mission failed to achieve its intended results? I think it's too simple an answer to simply say because trying the same failed policies over and over again is never going to work. But perhaps that is a place to begin. And I hope that we will hear tonight from our panelists some different ideas and more holistic approaches to insecurity and violence, and what it will take to actually change business as usual and move forward more peacefully. Now, it's difficult to talk about the issue of insecurity without discussing the role of international actors, and specifically the United States, the United Nations, and others who played such an outsized role throughout Haiti's history. And we can talk obviously about 200 years of history of interventions, of debt, aid, electoral interference. These actors have played no small part in bringing Haiti and helping Haiti come to this current status. Now, we've also heard the rhetoric time and again that this time will be different, right? This time we've learned the lessons of the past. And we heard this again in the fall of 2022, when the US, the UN, and others began openly backing a new foreign security intervention in Haiti. This wasn't going to be like those past failures, we were assured time and time again. Well, it took nearly 2 years for the first troops to arrive in Haiti, and they've now been on the ground for more than 6 months. And of course, we've seen little in the way of results. The reality is that the insecurity of today is a far more complex phenomenon. It is not something that can simply be addressed solely through force. A majority of those in the armed groups of the capital are children. The arms and ammo that fuel the violence come from the most powerful country in the world and are facilitated by powerful political and economic actors in Haiti, and oftentimes the very police force tasked with fighting the gangs. But I want to take a step back and turn to a question that rarely gets asked. These foreign troops are in Haiti to provide stability, but stability for whom? Unfortunately, what history has shown is that the stability so desperately sought by Haitian politicians, by foreign powers, by local business interests, it is not the same stability that the population of Haiti so desperately craves and deserves. It is stability for a status quo of massive inequality, of disenfranchisement, and of state violence, violence certainly of a different nature, but no less violent, that is inflicted on the population. So with that, I'll turn things over to Jessica to introduce this excellent panel we've assembled tonight. And I hope that question we can keep coming back to as a reference point and begin to have a conversation about what is really necessary to change the status quo and establish a lasting peace for Haiti. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake, so much for that introduction. I want to thank the crew, the team, for making this possible, Haiti Response Coalition, and all the sponsors. And the panelists. I'm really excited to hear these panelists. They're from different backgrounds. And as Jake was saying, I think we'll hear about a lot of the factors that has contributed to this moment. So without wasting more time, let us go straight to the panelists. Let me introduce the excellent group that we have here talking about restoring security in Port-au-Prince. We have Rosy, Auguste, who is with Réseau National de Défense des Droits Humains, the National Human Rights Defense Network here in Haiti. Juan Marquez, he's with UNODC, UN Office of Drugs and Crime. And then we have Louis-Henri with Lapè, also based in Port-au-Prince. And let me just introduce myself as well. My name is Jessica Shu. I'm based here in Port-au-Prince. I am an independent anthropologist, researcher, and advocate. I also have an affiliation with Roots of Development right now, and really I'm leading up their advocacy, learning, and research around community-led development and its linkages actually to peace building. With that said, let's get into the questions. The structure of today's panel, we're going to do some direct questions, have some direct questions to our panelists, then move into some general questions, and then open it up to some Q&A, and then close it up with some questions for our panelists. What I'm encouraging everyone to do that's participating today is to feel free to write questions in the Q&A, but also comments as you're hearing some of the things that our panelists are saying, and just your thoughts. We would really like to hear and have input on that. Okay, so let's move to our first panelist. Rosy, the first question is for you. Can you tell us more broadly about the justice system and how or if it is functioning? We talk a lot about ending impunity, but how can that actually happen when the judiciary appears so dysfunctional? What steps need to be taken to address this? And is this not just as critical as traditional security assistance?
Ok, merci en pile, Jessica. Bonsoir tout le monde. Nous contents pour nous partager un panel là avec tout panélistes. Merci en pile d'invitation. Et nous saluons tout le monde qui a participé dans l'activité. En fait, ça nous capable rapidement commencer par dire, c'est que thème justice là, en Haïti a mal fonctionné. Et ça, c'est depuis plusieurs années. Malgré tout millions de dollars américains que nous connaissons, qui dépensés pour renforcer la justice là. Et des qui vont mal fonctionner. Par exemple, on est non seulement bien l'argent pour sortir directement dans le cadre de coopération bilatérale entre Haïti. Nous connaissons non seulement bien l'argent qui sort directement dans le cadre de coopération bilatérale entre Haïti avec des autres pays parmi les États-Unis, Canada et la France. Et nous connaissons tout gagner un pile d'argent passé par différentes missions pour les pays. Pourtant, les clés de justice là, par exemple, améliorées. Nous, qu'à utiliser l'histoire récente pour nous montrer les bons justice là pas fonctionner. Depuis 2018, massacre avec attaque armée a fait passer par là le département de l'Islam avec le département de l'Islam. Pourtant, pas jamais gagné un jugement de fait. pour bandits qui impliqués dans massacre. Et pas même gagner un jugement qui fait derrière deux, ça y est, juger mon par contumace. Depuis 2018, le gouvernement toujours a changé. Et ça que nous toujours voyons ici en Haïti, c'est que pour bandits armés, je les veux dire, retrouver une fédération terroriste, que nous UNODC, pour y comprendre votre propagande autoritaire, eh bien, nous commençons à attaquer la population. Ça me veut dire, c'est que des fois, on pourrait gagner une petite calmie dans le temps changement entre deux gouvernements différents. Et puis après ça, bandits ont commencé à attaquer la population et la ville. D'ailleurs, RNDDH a mené une enquête dans plus passé 50% de camps qui gagnaient monde qui déplacés là-dedans. Et enquête l'a révélé que 54% de camps ça y est payé en 2024, 27% payé en 2023, 7% payé en 2022, 7% en 2021 et seulement 5% en 2010. Ça veut dire, dernière année, et particulièrement année 2024 à 2023, c'est année qui est plus dangereuse, c'est-à-dire pour la population, parce qu'elle attaque bandits et il développe la population. Or, enquête l'a révélé, nous que 95% de notre plan, c'est le monde qui était couru insécurité qui l'a donné. Ça veut dire que seulement 5% qui gagnent le monde qui était victime du tremblement de terre de janvier 2020. Pendant l'année judiciaire 2023-2024, là, ça veut dire l'année judiciaire qui se passe là, c'est seulement 241 personnes qui jugent dans tout pays devant le tribunal criminel. Alors que il y a plus passé 8000 personnes à temps jugement. Ça montre tout que justice n'a pas fonctionné. Juge le travail sur une base de loyauté très continue. Ils ont allé dans des renouvelés, d'occuper des renouvelés. D'ailleurs, peut-être insécurité gagner un pile tribunal qui déclassé, particulièrement dans le département de l'Ouest, là, nous avons un pile tribunal de paix qui n'a pas fonctionné pour cette insécurité. Nous connaissons le tribunal première instance et les déplacer tout, et je me dis, il y a de gros problèmes espace pour juger le commissaire gouvernemental pour le fonctionner. Le commissaire gouvernemental, il y a le travail pour les. Il y a un autre problème que nous pas capter derrière, c'est question de corruption qui gagne dans la justice là. La justice là, nous connaissons déjà les grands données en bas de corruption. Et le fait que c'est seulement les juges qui soumettent régulièrement à une vetting, pas faciliter l'amélioration service de la justice là. Parce que personnel judiciaire la Guinée, greffier, huissier, commissaire gouvernement, auton, etc. Mais tout l'autre monde, ça qui dans l'appareil judiciaire, qui fait partie du personnel judiciaire, il n'y a pas systématiquement fait vetting pour eux, même gens, ils fait pour juger. Façon de mener enquête, façon de mener vetting, pour juger, il pas aider la justice. D'ailleurs, premièrement, il y a une enquête souvent lorsque parvient une nouvelle nomination, il y a reconduction de un mandat. Or, tellement de magistrats avec l'autre personnel de la justice qui corrompu, enquête qui aurait été seulement sur point de vue. Entre-temps, il y a non, moi pas pli, et ma petite qui m'a parlé créole, mais entre-temps, il y a une que me tombe minute tout. D'accord. Donc, à quel niveau t'es, ou t'as qu'à dire, puis ça, ok. Ma préparation, vous pas gagné. Moi, t'as dit que enquête qui a fait sous juge, yo pas fait dans le sens que yo t'a doué. Puis ça, c'est parce que yo seulement fait enquête ça, yo, les poils une nouvelle nomination de juge, ou bien les poils renouveler mandat. Ça veut dire, par exemple, les mener enquête sur le magistrat et que nous renouvelons mandat pour 3 ans, pendant 3 ans, ils ne peuvent jamais se mettre en enquête jusqu'à ce que le poil renouveler mandat pour nous-mêmes, ce n'est pas suffisant. Mais, en plus de ça, tellement de magistrats et personnel de la justice qui corrompus, enquête qui aurait été seulement sur train de vie, sur l'argent que vous possédez, à bien que vous possédez. Ça veut dire qu'il n'y a pas mené enquête sur rendement magistral. Et Pendant nan niveau pénal, là, le pénal n'a pas fonctionné, c'est même constat tout que nous faisons pour les dossiers, tant que dossier civil, dossier commercial, dossier loyer et la cour. Donc, nous avons là, tout ça pour nous dire qu'en réalité, nous gagnons effectivement la justice pas fonctionné. Merci un peu.
Merci un peu, Rosy, et nous allons avancer. Oh, let me speak in English. I'm getting, thank you, Rosy. Let us move to our next panelist, Juan Marquez, from UNODC. Juan, can you talk about transnational organized crime that is discussed in UNODC reports to the Security Council? Also, can you talk specifically about arms and ammunition, where they are coming from? There's understandably a strong focus on those holding the weapons, but can you tell us also about the broader ecosystem of support for armed actors, and what are the connections with political and economic actors?
Great. Thank you very, very much, Jessica. Good evening, everyone. So let me just go back one step and precisely talk about the report. So for those of you that do not know, UNODC has been mandated by the Security Council to produce a quarterly report on routes and sources of weapons trafficking and illicit financial flows. And that has given us an opportunity to precisely go deep into the understanding of the regional networks that are facilitating and involved in the weapons trafficking. But not only that, because the routes that are used for weapons trafficking end up being bidirectional. And in some cases, these same routes are used for weapons trafficking, human trafficking, and other illicit trade in the region. And it is important to highlight something. Obviously, in Haiti, because of the location and a strategic location that has between Colombia, Venezuela, and the US, it has been for decades part of the drugs trade. And I think this is one of those elements of that ecosystem that you were asking about, Jessica, that whole ecosystem of criminality that has allowed the flourishment of criminal groups inside of the territory, in the Haitian territory. One of the main findings, and this has been very clearly pointed out in the reports presented to the Security Council, is that most of the weapons that enter illegally and legally the Haitian territory come from the United States. And of course, we understand that that there's certain laws that permit individuals to acquire weapons that is not criminalized or very much restricted in the US. But the moment that the crime is configured is when these actors that are buying the weapons legally or in a legal market in the US end up sending it illegally to Haiti. And this is not just a particularity of Haiti. This is one of the things that has been seen in several reports, regional reports in Latin America and the Caribbean, where weapons from the US end up making their way to illegal markets in the rest of the continent. And I think obviously the correlation, and you were clearly pointing out the correlation of these weapons trafficking and also drug trafficking with the role of political and economic elites. And of course, we have seen there's a whole set of sanctions regimes that has been set up within and mechanisms set up within the United Nations, as well as bilateral nations that have taken the lead on sanctioning individuals involved in criminality. And one of the main factors is their involvement in drug trafficking or weapons trafficking and financing of gangs. And I think this is a very important point to highlight, because one of the problems that I perceive, and the reports clearly highlight that, is that when we talk about the security problem of Haiti, we only refer to the gangs operating in the local territory. Now, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that some of these gangs have been fueled by criminal networks in the entire region. And by that, I mean some of the actors are involved in weapons trafficking, and that's why they occupy specific territories nearby the border or nearby port areas, or even in the Artibonite, which is kind of taking control of the main highways that connect the capital with key entry points in the country, whether it is ports or land border crossings with the neighboring country. So that is important to highlight, because in order to enhance security in Haiti, I think we need to have a regional perspective of how Haitian criminal gangs inside of the territory are interconnected through enablers, political elites or economic elites, with other regional groups, whether it is drug cartels or drug trafficking networks, or weapons trafficking networks, and how the strategy should not only be focused on hard security inside of the Haitian territory, but also looking at ways in which we can disrupt that illegal trade to then cut the flow of weapons and money that goes to the criminal groups, and also prevent the influence of these corrupt elements that facilitate the operation of the gangs in the territory by facilitating the weapons and drugs trade. So I think this is just a perspective, because when we look and when we hear the regular situation in Haiti, is the gangs are the problem. And I think there's a bigger ecosystem that has facilitated for these criminal groups inside of the territory to continue to terrorize the population, to continue to be involved in illegal trafficking, to attack and terrorize the population. So I think a good response is understanding the regional dynamics and how that impacts in Haiti, and how the situation in Haiti impacts the region. Let me just leave it in there for now, and please let me know if you have additional questions.
Thank you, Juan, for that summary on the ecosystems. Let us move to our next question for Louis-Henri Mas. Louis-Henri, could you talk about the past efforts around CNDDR, I'm sorry, and why they were not successful?
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this distinguished panel. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I think that the main issue of the CNDDRs that have been tried, there was DDR, there was the first CNDDR, there's a second one that came into play with Jovenel Moïse, and then they're talking about doing another one now, is that is the people who are setting up those CNDDRs, are they really committed to having these institutions function as institutions? Or are they paying lip service to something that has come from the outside, from the international community, saying, yes, you need to have a CNDDR and you need to do DDR and all of that? What we have seen over the past years is that none of the CNDDRs that have been established have been funded by the Haitian national budget. They're created and they're left on the laps of the international community for it to work, and so they've not had really the support needed from the government, from the state, and they cannot function without it being a holistic approach where the state itself is behind everything that's happening in the CNDDR. It's not a question of sending a few people out there and tell them, listen, you guys, you're gonna do dismantlement, you're gonna do disarmament, and then everybody goes back and takes care of their own business in the government. And the second thing also, the political the political input in terms of staffing of the CNDDR commissions themselves, without really thinking about the qualifications of those who are in those positions, and the interests at play is a big factor in them not being able to work. From there, you have the issue of the overall strategy of the disarmament process. Disarmament process cannot be just about disarmament. It has to be really a holistic approach in terms of the day after disarmament. The reason for that is because in the neighborhoods, there's been a lot of splits in the different gangs, and you have gang members are outside of the neighborhoods in exile that are just waiting for the gang that's inside to be disarmed so that they can move in. So it has to be really something that is thought through, and I don't see this happening in the disarmament process. You have to think about the day after. Is there a plan to occupy the space in the neighborhoods after a disarmament process? What is going to happen with the justice? We've just heard from Rosy that the justice system is not working. You'd have to go into a transitional justice process, but you have to have justice. And what is it going to look like if nobody's thinking about that at the national level, so that it's a national process. It's not the process of just one small institution. Then it's not going to work, and it will continue working. Is there a economic thought behind all of that? Because once you take the gun out of the young people and of the bosses, what do? Do they sit around twiddling their thumbs, or is there a plan to put them to work? And is there a plan to make sure that not only they go back to work, but the rest of the communities go back to work? So there's a thought, a planning to be done at the economic level so that there is massive jobs creation, maybe temporary to start with, but also thinking down the road of refinancing the private sector so that they can create permanent jobs. So I'll stop there for a moment, but it has to be a holistic approach, and the state, the government, has to not just outsource this process, but really be behind it and make it a national affair, not just the affair of a few people inside a national commission.
Yeah, thank you for that intervention. I think that last point you make is so critical, right? That the role of the state, and just to add a little bit to that too. I mean, I think so much of this is about the legitimacy of the state, right? Is that it's not just the state taking action. We've seen, I mean, there's been commissions, there's been this, right? There's all these things, but there's no trust in that process, right? And so what can happen, what can take place, what actions can be done to try to restore some of that trust, to restore some of that legitimacy, so that those efforts can actually carry on, can actually provide something meaningful. And I also I'm not gonna let Jessica off the hook. We're not letting our moderators off the hook tonight. So, but I want to add something to what Juan said too about the regional dynamics, because I think this is critically important as well in terms of just this flow. And I think one thing we've seen a lot, and I'm just going to talk about some specific things, right, from the United States, and talk about what a regional response might look like, right? So we see arms trafficking cases developed in the US justice system. We see people being, there was a trial that began just last week in Florida around arms trafficking to Haiti. But those cases are generally focused strictly on straw buyers, right? People in the United States who go and buy a bunch of weapons from a bunch of stores and then hand them off to somebody to ship them into Haiti. You can find a straw buyer in the United States for guns. It's not easy. It's not hard to buy guns in the United States. Anybody can do that. The network that actually needs to be dismantled to change that is as much on the Haiti side, right? That's facilitating their entry through ports. And yet what we don't see is the Department of Justice on the United States side actually pursuing these cases into Haiti. And of course, these people are subject to US jurisdiction because these are arms trafficked from the United States. There is a transnational nature, like Juan was talking about. And yet we so rarely see those cases that actually develop and actually go into that. And just as a very specific example, this was many years ago now, there was an arms trafficking case in South Florida, and a sitting senator, Hervé Fourcon, was mentioned directly at trial as somebody who was facilitating the shipment of arms on the Haiti side of things. Nothing happened. The US didn't indict him. He wasn't a part of that case. It just was swept to the side. And of course, then many years later, Hervé Fourcon shows up on the sanction list and we can say, okay, we're doing our job, but it's far too late to actually matter. So I think, in terms of regional response, it's not just what countries can offer Haiti in Haiti, but how can they use their own laws to disrupt these networks that, again, like Juan mentioned, are transnational in nature. So I'm going to turn things back to Jess and pose a question for her, which is, if you could tell us a little bit about how aid policies have contributed to the current crisis and how changes in the delivery of aid could actually help with a response to the security situation.
Sure. Thank you, Jake, for that question. So Jake was saying in his introduction that it's due to external and internal factors. And the question is security and stability for who? And the status quo is around disenfranchisement and marginalization. So with that framework, what I'm going to start to talk about is a little bit more about international aid, but at the root is the lack of a social contract, which is really a colonial legacy. And that has been exacerbated by foreign aid and interventions, resulting in what we see now is a weakened state. The decreasing of the role of the state as well, and breaking down the social fabric and cohesion of communities and civil society as a whole that makes it even more challenging to actually rebuild or build for the first time a social contract in present day. So since 2000, there's been about $20 billion injected into Haiti. And the question might be, why does Haiti look like this? Because of all this money and investments into it. But I would say that it is because this money has been injected into Haiti, this amount, and used in particular ways that has created the situation that we're in. And what I would say is that international aid is the soft power of foreign interests, the daily peaceful interventions that are framed as goodwill and good intentions. And these objectives have always been to shift the political economy of Haiti, making it more aligned with global economic interests, which is something Haiti has continually resisted, starting with independence, the abolition of slavery, and Black liberation. So just to talk specifically about this aid, what occurs frequently with bilateral and multilateral aid is that they come with conditions that do not allow Haitian leaders or communities to decide how that money is being used. And they're further siloed into sectors from humanitarian to development aid to peace building, and then further siloed by working groups and clusters into internally displaced peoples, WASH, food security, protection, etc. Some of the examples of these specific policies that we see from aid are the structural adjustment programs of the 80s and 90s that required Haiti to reduce social protections and privatize public services. So this has been the intention of aid, is really to support the private sector, eliminate state regulation of the economy, and decrease the role of the state in general. So since the first NGOs actually arrived in 1954 to respond to Hurricane Hazel, it was the likes of CARE, CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and the Red Cross. The number of NGOs that have shown up in Haiti has only increased. And what we now commonly hear Haiti is the Republic of NGOs. And so the amount of funding that has come into Haiti has not only increased dramatically since that initial, over the years, and we're talking about 20 billion since 2000, but the approach has been a top-down approach, which actually puts Haitians and Haitian communities peripheral. They're not in control of decision-making nor implementation, and are referred to as beneficiaries, victims, most vulnerable, poor, and a statistic or data that indicates the number of people in need reached and served. And in a lot of ways, this strips away people's dignity, but also creates dependency. It also creates competition and divisions within communities, and it breaks down the social fabric and social cohesion of communities. And they are given this identity as passive recipients rather than agents of change, or communities that have strengths, different capacities, and resources. And these processes have really weakened the social fabric, as I was saying before, pulling people from the countryside because private industry is so concentrated, as are basic services in Port-au-Prince, into the city. And what we know is that Port-au-Prince was built for a population of 200,000, and prior to the earthquake, it was close to 2 million. And so we have people coming in from the countryside to chercher la vie in search of livelihoods. And, you know, there's a lot of policies, like, for example, we know that Cité Soleil was originally created as Cité Simone to provide laborers for Hasco, the sugar company. In the 1980s and 1990s, people flooded in from the rural regions to try and find factory jobs. And these factory jobs are producing products for American companies. In addition, so we're talking about the breaking down of civil society, right? The weakening of civil society, but also the state has been weakened. And because basic services, public service have been privatized, there really isn't a relationship between the population and the state. Trust has been further eroded. And the population is increasingly impoverished, has less access to basic service. And in this vacuum, this has really allowed for armed groups to flourish, to consolidate their power, and to function. And so we had G9, JPEP, and now mostly consolidated as Vivre Ensemble. And with that said, with every earthquake, hurricane, and even in displacement crisis, community members almost predictably offer solidarity to each other. People in communities across the country will cite stories of solidarity in the aftermath of 2010 earthquake, 2016 Hurricane Matthew, 2021 earthquake. For those displaced by the current violences, this means, you know, solidarity means that people are opening their homes to people seeking refuge, providing food, water, and forms of support. But that solidarity is cited as being broken the moment external aid shows up. So what does this mean moving forward? We need to change the status quo. There's a lot of international commitments, global conversations, and these conversations are on point. The Grand Bargain of 2000 said at 16, one of the commitments is as local as possible and as international as necessary. We really need to take these things and implement them. And what does that mean? For me, the path to peace and real sustainable peace and sustainable security requires that international actors recognize the role that they've played and the detrimental impacts that aid has created. This means allowing Haitians to lead, implement, and have decision power. This means also not just writing a check. This means not just handing a check and money to community-based organizations, because that actually can do more harm than good, but actual real solidarity that invests in understanding the local context and realities, invest in building relationships, listening, being human, thinking about strengthening of local systems long-term that not just respond to emergency or crisis, and allocating money more to the long-term than emergency. The only Haitian-led solution is really a Haitian community-led solution with a particular focus on those that are most marginalized. So that's where I'll end.
Thank you, Jessica. I think it's critically important to add that into this analysis, and I think also speaks to what Juan was talking about, the transnational nature of these things, right? I mean, these are actions that are taken by other countries. This is not Haitian decisions, right? These are external factors that need to be incorporated into any analysis of violence and insecurity, and critically to be able to actually respond. Yeah, Louis-Henri.
Yes, I wanted to add to the issue of disarmament. The fact that the strategy that has been put in place or that has been talked about mostly and signed on paper but never enacted actually talks about the CNDDR being for the soldiers and not the bosses, uh, especially those who have judicial pursuit behind them. The CNDDR is not for them. So what happens is that the boss says, you know, this is not for me. I'm staying where I am. I have my guys. I'll send a few little soldiers to the CNDDR. Sometimes they're not even soldiers. They're attendants of the gang that go and work with the CNDDR. So it's clear that there has to be a justice component. But from the get-go, saying that the bosses are not part of that is putting them in a situation where they're going to resist and resist and resist. So this has to be, for me, this has to be reviewed and really thought through. Thank you. That's what I wanted to add.
Maybe we can just back up really quickly and just give Rosy another minute to complete something that she was saying. I know that there are some issues with translation, so she asked just for another minute. Rosy, are you there?
Oui, oui, bien sûr, moi là, et merci en plus, Jessica. En fait, ça que moi te voulais ajouter, c'est que, et l'éclair que justice là, il pas bien fonctionné, donc nous te démontré là, mais en plus, tout autorité l'État, il n'a pas jamais manifesté volonté pour le tribunal de fonctionner dans le respect de la loi. Et c'est ça qui fait que le tribunal est dans sa vie. Donc, avant tout, nous-mêmes, au niveau du RNDDH, nous estimons que pour que l'État manifeste volonté pour faire justice la travail. D'ailleurs, nous pensons que il est clair que M. Mansour Mouteli, et puis toute intervention, tout nous fait lui, pas de aucune façon que nous avons sorti dans sa sans une justice qui est forte, nous-mêmes, et qui met tête. Donc, pour que exiger chef de juridiction enquêter sur une faction et pour que exiger que nous juger et condamner pour ça que nous actes pour que la justice soit tout capable d'autocivil, les données ont une fraction passée et surtout les données vos massacres, vos attaques armées. Donc, c'est ça que nous devions ajouter par rapport à la première question, parce que nous peut arriver, nous avons dit dans des petites recommandations par rapport à la façon que nous faisons matin.
Thank you, Rosy, for that addition. And I think that's really, really important context. I think, so I know there's a lot of Q&A questions coming up. If the audience is okay with this, we might move into 2 general questions and start addressing the questions after. So I'm also going to ask Jake to participate in answering in some of these questions. He is not being let off the hook either. So the first general question is, what has been the approach of security forces on the ground? And I think this addresses one of the questions that's coming up in the Q&A. There have been many reports of extrajudicial killings of armored vehicles firing indiscriminately in certain communities. Does this, in effect, criminalize poverty and perpetuate the root causes of today's violence? Is killing everyone in certain violence-plagued communities really a lasting security strategy? So would one of our panelists like to start us off?
Sure, I can start it off. Yeah, it's true. The polarization is clear the control of the police forces by their hierarchy is very weak, and they have been shooting in the neighborhoods indiscriminately. Not all people who live in those neighborhoods are gang members or gang supporters. There's just people that that don't have the capacity to go elsewhere. And going elsewhere is also dangerous because if you come from a neighborhood that is known to be controlled by a gang, just the fact that you come from this neighborhood endangers your life outside of the neighborhood. So shooting into the neighborhoods is something that happens. The issue, I think, is also that there has to be a preparation, again, as I said, for the day after of people in the neighborhood, because the transmission of the habit of gang members and gang bosses has been going on for too long. In my work, I've witnessed some neighborhoods where over the past 10 years, there's been 9 different gang bosses. Some die, some go to jail, some even leave the country, but they are immediately replaced by another individual in another gang. Okay, so how do you stop that transmission of the power to another armed leader, even if the life expectancy of that leader is maybe 24 months. So yeah, that's a big issue.
Thank you. I think Rosy, you wanted to add something to this?
Ça nous fait que cette ligne qui est cassée dans approche de sécurité féminine. L'État haïtien qui est situation insécurité a atteint un niveau qui est tellement dépassé, dans l'Ouest avec le pays, toutes populations fatiguées avec nos vies, fatiguées victimes. Et dans une situation comme ça, non seulement il est facile que nous voulons justice privée, qui est donc le mouvement bois calé, qui on a pu nous donne, et il y a tout, malheureusement, une tolérance pour abus autorité la police. C'est dans ce sens-là que il y a un peu de dénonciation, exécution sommaire, ou soit que la police livre by population les été arrêtés, la population capable de aller et même j'entends gagner dénonciation, machine blindée capable de tirer sur beaucoup de monde. Même si nous peut dire que c'est notre volonté pour criminaliser les Européens, mais il faut que nous d'accord que c'est souvent côté qui gagne en plus monde, en plus densité population, et c'est souvent côté qui gagne en plus monde qui a plus besoin que de l'autre zone, que nous voyons que les acteurs à commettre. Nous, pas jamais suspendre, dénoncer volonté, autorité au gagner pour nous planifier à faire des attaques dans des zones spécifiques sous prétexte que vous voulez démontrer gang dans une zone sale. Alors que vous choisi des zones pour gagner mon population civile là, mais dans l'autre main, il y a un pile zone côté population civile là déplacée parce que bandit fait aller, mais ou pas ouais vous gagner volonté pour y aller démontrer gang dans zone sale. Ça veut dire m'a parlé des côtés pas gagner population civile mais gang toujours là nous déployer et ou pas attendre que nous voulons aller dans zone sale pour y aller faire intervention. Pour nous-mêmes stratégie tirer sur monde sans distinction, remettre nous que fin arrêter by population capable de boîte aller, exécution criminelle, ça pas qu'à stratégie pour rétablir sécurité dans une société qui est réputée démocratique. Mais comme nous dit, la police pas de moyens dans nous. Moyens qui nomment la police pas ni suffisant ni adéquat pour le faire travail. Yo toujours pas soumettre policiers à un bon vetting, un bon processus vetting, et ça la cause que la police là pas qu'à aider efficacement dans l'établi sécurité. L'armée Haïti pas gagné moyen non. De toute façon, c'est pas une armée qui structure. Et juste yo pas de moyens, yo pas de matériel, et même jantou, yo pas structuré, donc pas gagné en quel côté ou capable à porter plainte pour yon moun nan ou militaire qui commettent nos actes. Depuis juin 2024, force mission multinationale appui à la sécurité commencé à déployer en Haïti, yo pas de moyens suffisants dans mes retours pour résoudre le problème de sécurité. Il y a tant de promesses communauté internationale là pour être capable de moyens. Je pense que ça peut être répondre à une question que Jean-Louis et Ramsey, tout, m'espérer que bien dire, excusez-moi, que bien dire non, poser la question, les chat et une question-réponse. Nous-mêmes, nous sommes toujours sceptiques par rapport à la capacité de force là, pour établir la sécurité dans le pays, mais nous pas qu'à honnêtement demander pour y avoir des résultats lorsque y a pas de moyens numériques. Et par contre, nous croyons que l'argent qui a dépensé dans le poste là, ça supposé capable plus utile pour institutions haïtiennes, notre capacité pour résoudre problèmes de sécurité. Merci encore.
Juan, I see your hand up. Would you like to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. Just one perspective, because obviously this situation also kind of further demonstrates the breakdown of the justice system. Obviously, you know, we find ourselves in a situation where there is no functioning prisons that are human rights compliant, and that's obviously the judicial response in all these cases is quite weak. If you like, we don't have prosecutors, or we don't have enough prosecutors and judges to undertake the task. And I think this is precisely the systemic rupture of the system on the justice response. And that's why we see also, as Rosy was pointing out, the community responses becoming a form of justice, which at the end of the day, and I think most of us understand that this could lead to further problems in the further breakdown of the social tissue and the system of Haiti. And I think this is, once again, having that systems approach and understanding that the entire justice response needs support. It's not just the support to revamp the capacity of the police to be able to fight against criminality, but also create a strong system, justice system, that can also prevent violations of human rights, that can also respond to the issues of insecurity and criminality in the country. And I think it's just an additional perspective on or explanation on how this is becoming the norm.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. I mean, I sort of echo all of the comments that we've heard so far, but I just want to sort of bring things back to something Louis-Henri said earlier, which, around government action and sort of legitimacy of that government action. And so when you see these reports, when the police is doing these things, right, that is also directly undermining the state and the population's faith in the state. And that has a big role in all of this. And this, can be seen as another thing that perpetuates this cycle and really sort of, and also, I mean, in another sense, is also directly pushing people to armed groups in many ways. Talking about people in these communities who are sort of trapped, who can't leave, the police are not often seen as the protector. And that puts families in an extraordinarily difficult situation and have to make choices over their own livelihoods that, I think we do have to better understand those sort of forces. And so this is, I think a key thing. And, I think it's also something that, because of the level of insecurity, the level of violence that we've seen, and the focus on external support, on the MSS, on strengthening the police, getting weapons in the police, I think, these things can be important, but we need to also incorporate this into that analysis and into that rhetoric. And what is being asked for, certainly from an advocacy perspective and elsewhere, is that, it's not just a matter of, more ammunition or more equipment, but also how it's being used. And I think, for so long, the police in Haiti have been seen by a large segment of the population as protecting certain interests, but not necessarily their own, right? And until that dynamic shifts, until the population sees the police force as that thing, just like the government, as legitimate, as trustworthy, it's going to be very difficult to address these issues.
Louis-Henri, did you want to add one other comment?
Yeah, I personally I question the overall strategy of the PNH with their lack of capacity and all of that. But I don't understand the thinking about just reacting to everything that happens, and they're not focusing on one particular group that has the most vulnerabilities and is the weakest link in the system that they could take out completely. They never take out anybody completely. They just do hit and run, and I don't understand. I don't understand what's behind that. There's groups out there that are vulnerable that they should take out completely, and then establish their presence in that neighborhood and establish an example of for the rest of the groups that if you don't talk to us, this is what's going to happen to you. So I don't understand that strategy that they're in right now.
Thank you for that addition, Louis-Henri. So I'm looking at one of the questions, the Q&A, and this links to our next question for panelists. I'm going to address part of this question that's popping up on the Q&A. That's what's your opinion about the ambassador having periodic conversations with the gang leaders and admitting to doing so? Our next general question is along those lines. And so we've seen a strong reaction in opposition to the recent move by certain political actors to cite Vivre Ensemble in their correspondence to CARICOM, seeking a new transitional framework. Yet we know that foreign and local political actors are communicating with or negotiating access with armed groups on a daily basis. Is there a role that dialogue can play as a security strategy?
Nga commenter? Et m'a commencé par question ça qui posée dans chat là. En fait, information qui sorti que ambassadeur américain toujours en contact avec bandit, c'est une information nous capable qui confirme une perception de population haïtienne gagné que bandit yo gagné des contacts avec un monde tellement ambassadeur mais et avec nous dans cette politique là avec nous et au niveau du secteur privé affaires et nous tout en plus journalistes étrangers rentrer ici de faire et conférence avec eux. Je pense que c'est plus en confirmation que tu gagné des liens qui étaient déjà existés et des liens malvenus, hein, on est d'accord. Mais pour nous répondre à la question, ça nous capable c'est que en fait question de dialogue là, dialogue vivre ensemble, qui sont coalition dans le famille, nous pensons que en fait pas doué gagner question ça. Je ne dis à nous de focus sur victime. Gagner plus passer 150 000 personnes qui n'ont qu'un déplacé parce que bandit mettent en la caille. Gagner plus passer 1 million pour reprendre le chiffre Nations Unies qui déplacé seulement pendant l'année 2024 là parce que bandit a signé la guerre. Dans la situation ça, d'abord et avant tout, focus là doit se victime. Acteurs politiques étrangers, récemment ambassadeur américain qui ont contact avec bandit et mettez avec des acteurs économiques, oui, nous connaissons nos parler avec eux. Mais c'est nos parler en cachette, en fait, avec eux. Et en plus de ça, nous pensons, l'étape toujours plus facile. Pour les gens qui pas bien victime, sous braille, qui pas bien raison à victime, à faire apanage, dialoguer avec bandits, alors que genyen justement tout victime sa yo qui déplace. Et tout moun sa yo qui bandi tué yo, et tout femme sa yo qui bandi violé. Nous pensons, bon côté parmi, c'est plutôt vers démantèlement de communauté noire, arrestation bandi yo, jugement à condamnation. Après ça, toute l'autre considération doit venir après. C'est ça qui principe société haïtienne. Et dans ce cas, il faut qu'on dise, nous vraiment penser que la communauté internationale, li genye là, dans point ça, obligation pour les quitter haïtiens joindre une solution à problème. Nous pas voulons éprouver nous aucune question de démobilisation, et d'ailleurs, nous se dit tout à l'heure là, question de démobilisation, démantèlement, réinsertion de vie, nous pas de résultat de ce pays. En 2004, 2005, 2006, bandits n'ont pas aussi violents. Tout viol que nous avons enregistré, il n'y a pas de bien en 2004, 2005, 2006, même si c'est bien viol. Tout viol collectif, ça, tout assassinat, tout est tête boulée, nous pas de bien. Donc, d'abord et avant tout, la société a besoin de justice. Différentes solutions que la communauté internationale, de manière générale, côté pour nous, ne pas jamais aider nous. L'argent, le côté pour nous, pas aider nous. C'est des cadeaux empoisonnés pour nous-mêmes. Et pour ça, nous pensons que nous pas capturer, nous mettons des programmes pour protéger les bandits, pour aider les bandits à reconstruire la vie, et puis pour nous briller les victimes. Et enfin, pour nous dire que il y a des séries de groupements dans des pays, de l'autre pays, qui prennent armes pour être capables de défendre une idéologie. Ou soit pour être capable de défendre droit et une catégorie spécifique dans la société qui a besoin de protection spécifique. En Haïti, c'est nous bouge plusieurs journalistes étrangers à quelques journalistes haïtiens que nous apprenons que bandits ont une idéologie. Pas nous vivre nous-mêmes, nous joignons que. Mais toute route, même route que people n'a passé. D'abord, il y a un candidat ou bien il y a un monde qui a besoin de pouvoir, bah, aux armes, l'argent, à munitions. Deuxièmement, yo membre dans le secteur privé à faire là, bah, aux armes, l'argent, à munitions, pour faire concurrence déloyale, ou du moins pour protéger propre business par eux. Troisième possibilité, yo vin, certaines, troisième chemin, troisième point dans le chemin, excusez-moi, pas possibilité, yo vin utiliser armes ça yo, et ils viennent plus ou moins autonomes par rapport à toute l'argent, toutes les armes, toutes les munitions que le monde s'est baillé. Ce n'est pas des gens qui ont idéologie, c'est des gens qui ont fait des crimes contre la population. Donc, je ne dis pas, focus là, ce n'est pas sous-le privé, focus là, c'est d'abord et avant tout ce qui est victime par le privé. Et nous parlons de victimes qui déplacées, nous parlons de toutes victimes qui n'ont qu'un ou bien qui déplacées en d'un pays. Mais toute victime qui était obligée de quitter Haïti, aller aux États-Unis, par exemple, aller au Canada ou dans n'importe quel autre pays, plutôt choisir vivre n'importe qui dans l'autre pays, plutôt que de rester Haïti, c'est des victimes population, c'est des mines population qui ont besoin de réponse. Donc, c'est des victimes qui attendent une réponse. Non, mais la justice, pour le faire comprendre, pour qu'il fasse un beau jeu, c'est qu'il y a tout déferlement de violence à assumer. Merci.
Jake, did you have a follow-up question to that?
No, I see Louis-Henri's got his hand up, so please.
Okay. Louis-Henri?
Yes, when we talk about dialogue, Lapè is an organization and a community of people who is engaged in dialogue and conflict transformation. But when we talk of dialogue in Haiti, we're talking about the whole social pyramid has to go into a dialogue process so we create a situation where there is a mental disarmament of everybody involved in society through building a common humanity and a community of people that are going forward together. The gangs are a sector in society. This society has to discuss why there is a need for some individuals to use armed groups to either come to power or hold on to power or defend a living through violence. And you're not going to be able to kill all gang members. The issue of how you're going to reverse the situation that you're facing here now has to be addressed by the whole Haitian population. But we've been living through violence for a long time, and there is not going to be lasting peace in this country until the structural violence that exists in this society is transformed. And if it's transformed through violence, we're going to have more violence. So for us, it's through dialogue that we have to come into a situation where, what we've been living for the past 200 years, we are transforming this situation. The exploitation, the exploitation of a mass of people, to enrich a small group has to cease if we want to have lasting peace in this society. And for that, we have to use dialogue. And if we leave the armed groups out of the dialogue, they're gonna crush it once more. So they have to participate for me. That doesn't mean that we're not taking care of the victims. The victims have to be involved also. So it has to be a whole of society approach for me.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think this comes back to something I mentioned in the introduction, which was sort of repeating past behavior, doing the same thing again and again. And I think, we all can acknowledge is that there has been informal dialogue between political actors, economic actors, just people going about their daily lives, NGOs, there's been dialogue with gangs under the table, behind closed doors forever, right? And continuing along that is going to happen if there isn't a process like what Louis-Henri is talking about, right? If there is not a broader thing to formalize that, to turn that into a broader process that incorporates victims, that incorporates lasting solutions, right? Then it is going to be perpetuating that same dynamic of these under the table negotiations, these behind closed doors negotiations that has caused so much of what we've seen. And so, I would just echo that. And I know we're running pretty low on time here, Jess, so maybe we'll move to some of the Q&A questions and try and get through a few of those here before time cuts.
Yeah, I think maybe what we'll do is just go to one Q&A question. I really love am appreciating this conversation. But I definitely want to give some space to Q&A. One of the ones, let's see. Agreed that disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration needs to be linked to economic opportunity, and not just for former gang members, but for communities. What are your thoughts, recommendations on opportunities for sustainable job creation, not cash for work type activities? Where would the jobs come from?
The jobs have to be created by investment from the national and international private sector. But that is not going to happen if you don't have an ambiance, fertile ground for businesses to thrive, security, and economic financial support for investments so that people can create. I think that Haitians have incredible creative capability. If the ground is there, is prepared, is fertile, businesses will be created, people will be employed. But if the environment does not allow for that, it's not going to happen. So for me, the sustainable jobs have to come from private sector, in national, international investment. Now, there has to be a period where you're just employing people for infrastructure work on a temporary basis. because it's not going to happen overnight that people are comfortable and trust the environment so that they're going to put their money, in Haiti. So yeah, for me, this is where it's going to come from.
I'm going to transition to being a participant for a moment and maybe answer that question as well. I think this goes along with the conversation we're having before. Yes, international investment, but also understanding what are local resources and capacities and what is the historic context, right? I mean, Haiti is so hyper-centralized. Do we want to create all these jobs in Port-au-Prince? I don't think that is what we're looking to do. Haiti has historically been an agriculturally based country. This is a conversation I have with different people that are working in the sector of agriculture, but how do we make agriculture sexy again? How does it become productive? How does investment go into agriculture where, where it's being supported and growing because there's so much potential and the import market overrides the local market? Why are we purchasing coconut oil from other places? Why are we getting bananas and eggs from the DR? This is just one example, but I think there really needs to an evaluation before investment happens on what are local resources and capacities and what does the local labor, what are the capacities of local labor as well? So I'll stop there because I see Juan's hand up and pass it
Great.
to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, and I absolutely concur with what you just said. I think there has to be a proper evaluation of what were those products that Haiti was economically good at producing to share with the world. And I think this goes back to a point that I think it has been raised in certain books, including in Jake's book, if I'm not mistaken, and is the point that we have believed, or we have been forced to believe, that Haiti is a poor country. But in reality, when it comes to the capacities and the resources of the country, Haiti could be economically viable on its own without dependency on foreign aid and investment. Nonetheless, obviously, with failed processes of creation of economic systems that perhaps do not reflect the reality of the country, we have broken that, and that, in the rural areas, Haiti has the capacity to start to go back to an exporting capacity of certain resources. Obviously, it's not my area of expertise 100%, but looking at those capacities and that knowledge that already exists in the country and using that instead of just bringing foreign economic models to force the country to migrate and to produce certain products that are not even a part of the strength of the country. I think that should be something to look into. And once again, reminding ourselves that Haiti does have the resources. It's just a matter of looking on how to exploit those resources more effectively for the generation of the jobs.
Thanks, Juan. I was going to ask you a bunch of questions about drug cartels and stuff, but I see you've answered some in the Q&A, and we don't have that much time. So we'll do a separate event, and you can just talk to us about drugs, and that'll be that.
Well, I can. You let me know.
So Rosy, are you back with us? I saw you disconnected briefly.
Okay.
Can I
mais me tenía un problème de connexion Internet. Ça va?
Yes, we can hear you. So Rosy, I had one question for you, and I know we only have a few minutes left here, so it can be brief. But somebody was asking about recent changes with the police, the nomination of former DG Mario Andrusol. I was just wondering if you've seen any recent actions or sort of moves from the government that give you some optimism or that you think are moving in the right direction.
Bon, écoutez, nous pensons que de manière générale, et pour bien tenter, ouais, que la situation de sécurité est améliorée, et bien avant que, c'est commencé à améliorer un petit peu, bien avant que le sol diminue. Et nous pensons que c'est un bon bagage que des mondes, que de passer éclairissant dans l'administration publique, là, au niveau de la sécurité, hein, nous venons en coup nous pensons que c'est bien passé. Mais, seul ça me dit, c'est que, même si je viens de dire, janvier 2025, situation face à le au début de l'année 2024, là, où nous avons quitté l'année 2024. Mais clair que, et puis sur l'amélioration pour nous, il n'y a pas qu'à crier, parce que il n'y a pas qu'une action pour pas de crier, pour retirer notre capacité et sans que les deux parents là, la police pas de moyens, donc, nous attendons pour nous, mais ça qui est positif, c'est que janvier 2025 a commencé les gens avec janvier 2024 parce que activité, même si nous pouvons manger un petit restreint, mais activité, continuer à faire en termes de qui à l'école, votre ouvert, secteur formel avec secteur informel, qui plus ou moins a essayé de fonctionner. Nous attendons pour nous qui ça m'a eu sol à côté pour nous. Mais nous songeons quand même que c'est un secrétaire d'État à la sécurité. Donc, il n'y a pas un monde qui est opérationnel, il n'y a pas un monde qui peut bien troupe dans pour y diriger. Et donc, nous attendons pour nous quand même. Mais nous pensons que le capoté est bon bagage.
Thank you, Rosy. Louis-Henri, I know you had a brief remark you wanted to make. You do that like, real quick.
I think we should not neglect the capacity of Haitians to use technology. A few years ago, when Ben Horowitz was in Haiti, the Silicon Valley investor, he was really interested in investing in Haiti with the young people here. And I think that's a capacity that Haitians have developed over the years, and we should think about that. Yeah.
Thank you. So I've cut my closing short, but very quickly, yeah, just another thank you to everyone who participated, who showed up to listen and ask very good questions. Hopefully, we've gotten to most of them at least, and to all the panelists for taking the time out of their day and offering their perspectives here. And I think, and I hope everyone's sort of come away with a broader perspective of insecurity and what the challenges are for Haiti. And we've heard from Jessica around the role of foreign aid and how changing foreign aid can play a role in this, from Juan about the transnational nature of criminality and how a regional perspective and regional approach can play a role, from Rosy about the dysfunction of the judiciary system and how combating impunity is at the core of so much of this, and from Louis-Henri around the role of dialogue and peace building and what it'll actually take to get there in these holistic approaches. And so I think, hopefully overall that has offered folks, a different perspective than what we're often getting day in and day out in the media, both in Haiti and abroad, that treats crisis after crisis as the only thing that ever happens in Haiti, right? But trying to extend the lens beyond that to see what are the factors that actually brought Haiti here, and what are the factors and issues that need to be addressed to achieve a more peaceful and sustainable path forward. So thank you all once again, and hopefully we will continue this conversation on another night.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Naomi, handing it back to you.
Oui, merci. Wow, ça c'est une discussion qui était vraiment excellente. Merci à tout panélistes qui vraiment fait une analyse excellente et qui va éclaircissement sur la situation ça qui a affecté tout Haïtien examen Haïti. Un grand merci à mon panel, Rosy, Auguste, Juan Marquez, Louis-Henri, Jake, à Jessica. Merci un pile pour le travail. Encore une fois, expertise nous. Merci pour toute question que nous avons pour nous, qui vraiment animé et puis aider nous rentrer à fond dans le sujet ça. Et puis, merci à Respond Crisis Translation, Christelle Agdebi. Nous remercions les partenaires l'autre fois encore, Haitian American Foundation for Democracy, Haitian Bridge Alliance, Roots of Development, Université des Atlantes, Action Carrella, qui toujours aidé nous avec et conversation ça. N'a pas rappelé nous que série ça rebrasser avec chaque mercredi à même là jusqu'à fin mois février. Et n'a profité d'annoncer deux sujets que n'a couvrir semaine prochaine. Dans 2 semaines qui viennent là. Semaine prochaine, n'a parlé de justice avec la paix, dans un sens qui respecte droit moun. Next week, we're having the topic will be peace and justice, a human rights-based approach. Et puis, 5 février, nous avons Gerline Joseph from Haitian Bridge Alliance. We'll have Gerline Joseph to discuss being Haitian in the US, confronting racist attacks and changing immigration policies. Qui j'en sais pour Haïtiens qui vivent aux États-Unis, qui j'en a fait face à attaques et actions racistes et puis changement dans la loi immigration. Ça vraiment clé parce que nous avons une qualité politique qui déjà prend avec nouvelle administration qui déjà établie. Merci tout le monde, merci de l'attention nous, merci de participation nous, bonne nuit et puis nous rencontrons encore semaine prochaine.